I gave a very brief introduction, but why don't you tell us in your own words just a little bit about the background to your career and what led you to the role that you're in now?
Yeah, I'm sure happy to. So I'm actually an economist by trade, and I did spend a brief stint with the federal government, which was very fascinating and exciting, but definitely not where I saw myself long term at the time. And so I really caught the bug, and the bug was the entrepreneurial bug. And so I actually traveled abroad and started a few businesses out there early on. And one went a horrible failure, one did a little bit better, and it was a really interesting way to start your career and sort of struggling through there. But early on, I really fell in love with the tech space and what was happening, and so after that, took its path. I thankfully and did some amazing, really exciting work with the BC Tech Association. And then I worked for a local anchor tech company, a great success story here in Vancouver called Global Relay. And for the last 9 years, as you mentioned, I've been the COO at Trulioo. And I joined this outfit when we were about 15 to 20 people or so, and I've had the extreme privilege of helping lead pretty much every department in the company at some point in time in the last little while. And it's just been a really great experience of growth and working with some incredibly talented people on complex but exciting and highly topical subject matter that's really solving a need for the global economy, let alone the BC one. So that's a little bit about sort of where I came from and what I'm still doing today.
I'm remembering that it was probably 7 years ago that I remember listening to you on a panel at BC Tech, and you were telling us then about the product and what Trulioo could do. It was obviously at a much earlier stage, but maybe for those of our audience on the line who aren't familiar with your business and what you do, just tell us a bit more about what the platform does.
Yeah, so around here we're really driven by a few key themes. One of them being financial inclusion, one of them being how do we democratize the digital economy, and frankly, how to build a trust layer on the internet so that people and businesses can transact and interact safely. So what that means for us as an identity verification platform is we really ensure that anytime an individual or a business is opening an account with a digital organization, that they are verified correctly, that they are who they say they are, and that they're not engaging in any fraudulent or bad activity. And we help organizations do it in a way that they can comply with both regulatory obligations, but also trust and safety objectives. So, a really classic example is if you open up an account on a digital bank, let's say, and you have to fill in your information, or you take a picture of your face and a picture of your ID or something along those lines. That's all of us, Trulioo, in the background, helping organizations do that seamlessly in real time. And today, we're very fortunate to do that in pretty much every country around the world. And we have customers transacting with us the span of the entire world. And some of the customers that do that with us are organizations of apps that you have on your phone, household brand names, some of the largest banks and financial and payments companies in the world. And it keeps growing just like that.
That's so interesting. Now, this last 9 years is quite an interesting period of time to think about in terms of how
Absolutely.
much we all do online and how much business is done online. So maybe you could tell us what's changed in that period, what you've seen change, both from the perspective of the individual user, but also from the point of view of your customer, the corporate that needs your platform.
A couple really fascinating trends in that time period. I mean, I think with COVID, we all said that there was about you know 30 years of technological innovation in about 3 months' time, just because of the demand for people to interact online. because they were limited from being able to actually physically go to places and interact and transact. So the world's changed significantly just from a participation perspective. People from every country in the world see the digital economy as an opportunity, not only to participate with their peers from a social interaction perspective, but also to find employment, also to sell their wares, but also just to participate in an economy that's thriving online. And so that demand from an individual perspective to be included in the digital economy has grown dramatically. I think the other piece that goes along with that, unfortunately, is the fraudulent activity has been equally aggressive, and the attack vectors that happen online have grown significantly. And so there's that dual motion of wanting to create a safe environment and having to defend against people that are trying to take advantage of that similar experience that has created an explosion of requirement for these kinds of tools to make digital interactions easier and safer. And you combine that with the third, leg of the stool, which is our data and privacy and who we are as individuals. And there's been a huge surge in regulation around what organizations should do and can do with personal data and the kinds of consent and acceptance they need to be able to do that from individuals. And so those regulations have made really a patchwork of operational constraints and obligations that organizations and companies need to abide by. And that can be different from whether you're in Canada versus the US versus China versus Australia versus Brazil, et cetera, et cetera. So dealing with those kinds of restrictions and dealing with that, that environment has become a really big challenge for businesses that want to operate and want to expand internationally. So those three forces coming together have created a really interesting and high impact world to operate in, and really been at the driving force of Trulioo's success in those last several years.
That makes sense. Now, I have a question for you. As a Canadian company operating in a global marketplace, are
Yeah.
there advantages to the Canadian reputation or stereotype? Or are there disadvantages? How does that play out?
I think there's a ton of advantages personally, and I think you know one of the first ones are the people. I mean, we're at an extreme privilege here of having individuals that come from all around the world, right? That are in Canada, in BC especially. And it's really hard to service global customers if you don't know sort of how they think, what the norms are, or what the different local challenges they face to be successful in their own realm. And so having access to that talent pool that has such a large global experience is an incredible advantage here locally. So that's a thing that we really lean into. I also think while we do have today offices in three other big cities around the world, Dublin, San Diego, and Singapore. I always joke that our culture are good Canadian kids when it comes to how we service the customer, the way we go above and beyond to ensure that we're listening and empathizing with what they need to get done. And that feedback loop plays heavily into our product roadmap planning, our customer success strategies, and ultimately, I think it's an unfair competitive advantage that we have against competitors to really be a trusted partner and a trusted expert with these really hard problems that they're trying to solve. So that works really well for us when it comes to regulatory technology and compliance technology, but it also builds long-term relationships with customers, and they will give you every opportunity to succeed, and they want to see you succeed when you treat them that way and when you go above and beyond to try and make them successful. So I think being in Canada and BC specifically is a huge advantage for that, without a doubt.
Oh, it makes so much sense. I think it must have some kind of halo effect that you're in this business with all these bad actors and developing a product that can help tackle that and help customers with verification and trust. And you're that trusted, nice guy Canadians.
Exactly. And I mean, it's a real serious problem. We see it every day, right? We see people get defrauded every day. We see these issues at play. We see data leaks every day. And so you do have to aggressively pursue what you need to get done, and you have to have a really clear line of sight and go about it strategically and competitively. But you can do it in the right way, is what I believe has driven our success in large part.
Great. Well, let's dive a little bit deeper into that scale up journey. So,
Yeah.
Trulioo scale up journey. When you think back, when you reflect back, what were some of the biggest challenges or obstacles? What did you have to navigate through that were really difficult?
Yeah, Jill, first of all, I really love what you're all doing with the Scale Up Academy and the lessons that you do. And I think one of the cool things about those sessions are you try and uncover the less thought about items around what can we share with people that are really tangible. I think everyone, there's some big company items that obviously come up that are challenges. You need to make sure you have product market fit. Who do I hire first? How do I make sure I have enough runway to innovate the way I want to and be able to make payroll? Those are obviously existential startup questions that get asked. From my point of view as a COO, and sort of I like to get in the weeds a little bit, and I'm sure, hopefully the folks that are on the session today are operational or at that stage where they could use a little bit more of the nitty gritty. There's three quick things that I like to think about. There's one on people, there's one on what I call paper, and then there's one on product. The people one this is more directed at founders and early employees. I think there's a real push these days to shy away from, well, really to say, hey, I'm going to hire a good person and just let them fly and leave them to do what they do best. And I think as a startup, it's a little counterintuitive and maybe an unpopular opinion, but I think for a big challenge for us was we need to stay involved as senior leaders in the most critical aspects of our business, really continue to stay involved. There are critical junctures as you're scaling up and as you're a startup trying to grow that really require a lot of attention, and that you could have the best person working for you in the world, but you really want to be there with them to help make those decisions and guide that strategy in those critical junctions along your path. And I think that there's a trend to almost shy away from that. I'm not talking, and there's a lot of bad ways to do that. You could micromanage your people, and that's not what I'm talking about at all. It's about doing it in a supportive way, in an involved way that breeds alignment and it breeds effective and scalable decision making. But it also ensures that the right model that you want to build is substantiated over and over again as you encounter those repeatable challenges that you come up against time and time again. And so I really like getting involved with my teams in a good way, and I really like to encourage that across all of our team members, and that goes both ways, up and down. The second piece is paper. Privacy is a big issue right now for technology companies of all stripes. And I think the challenge for us in the early days was we'll sign anything to get a customer. Sign any contract you can, get the customer, get the vendor, do whatever you need to. I think you really need to be smart around how your legal operations and what you agree to and what you don't, by thinking about what that's going to look like in years to come when you're trying to raise money, when you're trying to take another step, when you're trying to land larger customers that have even bigger obligations on you, whether they're InfoSec or otherwise. And so thinking early on about what kind of liability measures you're going to open yourself up to, how to structure a contract in a way that will benefit you long term. There's a lot of pieces in there that you could talk about for hours that are really important for startups to think about as you scale. And that was a big challenge for us that I think we did really well in light of the privacy landscape, in light of the kind of data that we deal with. And the last is product. Product, you can have big wins early on and it can grow really fast in a scale up. And we were very lucky to have that experience. That kind of growth can at times cover up product deficiencies that you don't necessarily see right away because of how certain things that, you have to be good to be lucky, but there are times when, growth can cover up underlying issues that you need to face. And that's a big challenge because when you're trying to launch multiple products, when you're trying to continue to get sustainable growth, or when you have an economic churn, you need to be really on top of the kinds of things that are working and really dig deeper into what are your analytics saying, what are the signals that you're seeing in your customer usage, how your customers are using your product, and what really defines success to make sure that you are prepared for when things go a little sideways or when you're trying to invest in the right places in your business and have more successes versus failures. And so I think that's a big challenge that every company goes through. That's not unique, but you have to remember to really focus on it, and that will help sustain your growth. Those are sort of the three things that I think about when it comes to challenges over the last time, and that they still happen today that you need to continuously be focused on.
That's great. Thank you. So if I heard you correctly, it's the three P's, right?
You
People,
got it.
people, paper, and product. So to everyone who's on in the audience, I'd invite you to think about those three P's in your business. Is there anything where you'd like some advice from Zac on, or are there particular challenges that you're facing right now in your business again where you'd love his advice? So we'll keep talking, but you think about how we can be useful to you.
Yeah.
Now, maybe I could ask you just a follow-up question on one element of that, of those P's, the paper piece and IP, because I do think it's an area that we're really very focused on at BC Tech right now, because we are concerned that one of the key success factors around scaling up is to make sure that you've protected your IP. We've got a program going that enables us to offset the costs for our members of investing in some IP projects. I know if you're at Global Relay and now at Trulioo, IP must be top of mind and one of the things you guys manage really carefully. Is there any one piece of advice you'd give to startups on that?
I mean, to go back to the contractual aspect, when you feed um, results and when you feed a decisioning engine for your customers, there is that IP conversation in the contract about what do you own or what are you licensing and for how long. Every product deployment's a little bit different, but from that perspective, you definitely need to make sure that you have unhindered rights to the own IP that you create. There's another element of that is most software products, you're going to gain some kind of analytic, right? Based on your customer interaction with your product or how those customers interact with that product versus other customers in your platform or in your ecosystem. When you deal with really large customers, which tends to be the majority of the customers that we deal with, they can be very sensitive around how you use those kinds of insights and how you build today, right? AI is a very big topic, but AI and ML has been actually leveraged for a long, long time in most tech companies. But the models you build and the insights that you can extract from that customer usage of your product, that's IP. And in many ways, that can be a extremely valuable multiplier on the value of your company overall, because those insights and those models that you build can be leveraged to do new and interesting things that are unique to your business and your customer set. So when I think about IP, that's where my mind always goes, is to ensure in your contracting process that you retain the rights to use and leverage that information to improve your product, to build new products, and that you yourself own it, as opposed to being licensing or have any limitations there. And you can't always get that with everything for everyone, but that's definitely a fight worth, well, let's say a debate worth having with your customers that push back on those rights.
That's excellent. And as you say, ultimately it's a business decision. But what we want to make sure is that our members are supported with knowledge of what their rights are and they're making informed choices. So I see that the team has put the link in the chat. If you're interested in learning more about the IP Accelerator, please reach out. Now, moving on from those challenges and obstacles that were part of the Trulioo journey, tell us also about the achievements and milestones along the way that were real moments of pride.
Yeah. I mean, first one's always customers. At least I would hope it would be for most of the people on the line. We were very, very lucky. It was a blessing and a curse at some ways. Our earliest customers were heavyweights, the biggest payments company in the world, the biggest marketplace in the world that we all use every day almost. One of the biggest banks in the world. Those were our first customers, and And talk about a milestone. It takes a village and it takes every single person in an organization to win those kinds of customers. And it still does today around here. We celebrate our customer wins in a big way because everybody gets involved in them. The reason I say it was a double-edged sword is because those customers were also very hard on us early on. And so we had to grow up really fast. And we had to do a lot of work to earn the trust of those customers. But once that work paid dividends, and I remember in our second tranche of large customers, I said, "Wow, for a startup, you have all of these things really buttoned up. Your infosec, your legal, your SLA, your customer support. These are more buttoned up than I've seen of any company or vendor, software provider your size." And that's a point of pride for the organization. And we really leaned into a customer first culture here. And for a long time, we never did any upsells even. We were just all about, if we make sure the customer is happy and satisfied, they will throw more business our way. And that's what ultimately happened. So, the big milestones were the early ones about those first really big customers. And that's what I still remember back to this day. And even this week, we were celebrating some really big customer wins. That's a continuous milestone that we really like to celebrate around here. I think the second one is I go back to the people, and you know, I I had the privilege of working in a company before this one, Global Relay, that was already at scale in many ways, hundreds and hundreds of employees doing really well. When I started here, we were really small. And I remember the day that we sort of hired our 50th employee, and I personally saw in the office, people were finally starting to, hang out with each other. There was enough people there that they enjoyed each other's time. They were going out, they were having, going for dinner after. And it was finally felt like a really, a community enough that was big enough where we could survive, as a business. We were at an employee count where people were really gelling together. And, that was just a really happy time for me, that you felt that you'd gotten over that hump. And it just took off from there. So I really remember the early team and hitting that size, and geez, that's still pretty small, but for us it was really meaningful, and I remember it quite specifically back then.
Well, those are definitely key milestones that you see in lots of successful scale up journeys, right? The best dollar is a customer dollar. And when you get to that community size and you start to have momentum and really get excited as a team about where you're going, it's powerful. So
Yeah, no, I mean, the people one, I could go on. I mean, I remember the first time we hired our co-op was a co-op that then came on to a full-time employee. I remember that like it was yesterday. That was a really exciting time. And then there's all these little ones in between where you hired people and then you just see them excel and grow and take on more responsibilities and shift over laterally to other areas of the business, and do really really special things in that way. And that's really the good stuff when you've been at a company for a long time, just seeing the evolution of the team.
totally. My thanks, first of all, to MJ and Scott. Thank you for participating in the chat. That's excellent. And again, encouragement to anyone who has any comments or questions, please just drop them in. Now back to you, Zac. Today, Trulioo is truly an anchor in the BC Tech ecosystem, and a role model to lots of our startup members, which we hugely appreciate your support, encouragement of us in our work, and our members. But I wanted to ask you, what does being a BC anchor mean to Trulioo?
Oh, you're kind enough to say that, Jill. I appreciate it. We still think we have a long way to go, so there's a lot of humble folk around here. But I do think that, when you look at the BC tech ecosystem, and I've been in it now for, about 15 years or so, it's we need to see, companies, more and more companies get to these kinds of sizes, because you get a really up close and personal look at what success can be, right? And what success looks like. And I really believe that it's hard to model success. It's hard to know what excellence looks like unless you're in it and you can really see it and experience it. There's so much great literature out there. There are so many great role models and speakers, and that is all excellent information, and you should consume as much of it as you can. But until you're really in it, and you experience the growth and you see the micro decisions and the micro behaviors that happen in a company that knows what you need to do and has gotten there, it takes that knowledge and that understanding to a whole other place. Um, we've seen it in really large companies international where they had a big success. A lot of the early founding or early employee team members went off and then created big companies all on their own, and you see that sort of snowball effect. um, that's what I hope for here. I see people that have worked here that have gone on and started their own companies, and it's really exciting to follow their journeys as well. I see people that have done amazing things at other larger companies in BC and then come here and taken us to that next level that we need to get to, and vice versa. And so I think being an anchor is just that. It's really just contributing to the BC tech ecosystem, and bringing that understanding of what it takes to be successful to more and more and more organizations around the community here, that hopefully success breeds success, and hopefully those examples are really learned upfront and personal, and can drive behavior that continues to grow technology companies here and abroad, and for folks that are a part of it is really sort of what I think it means to us.
That's excellent. Thank you. Now, if we think about BC's tech ecosystem, um, there's definitely lots and lots of strengths. And maybe you could just talk about a few of those. What is it that you think we have as natural advantages or advantages we could invest more into? What what are our strengths as an ecosystem that we can further develop?
Absolutely. I mean, I mentioned the people earlier, and just to drive the point home even further, you need a wide range of opinions and experiences to create something special and to create a special company. You really can't create a great company without great people, and I'm a big proponent of you need diverse points of view to get to the best solution. If everybody thinks the same way and everyone's had the exact same experience, you might solve a single use case or a single very narrow objective. You're not going to get through the hard things, and business is hard, and tech is hard. So I really think that variety of opinion and that variety of experience here is special and it's unique, and we try and attract as much of it as possible. And that isn't the case everywhere. So leaning into that here in BC is something that if you're not taking advantage of it just naturally, you should absolutely prioritize ways to lean into that and to solicit it further. And that's a cultural norm here around communicating openly and collaborating effectively with diverse opinions. So I think that's a real strength of the BC ecosystem. I think the other piece is, you know, we have sort of a West Coast kind of advantage here where we do have a lot of exposure from other, West Coast cities down south that have really grown, obviously, and done great things. And that proximity, you do also gain a lot of insights, and you can experience that really easily, and bring those sort of lessons and grow them here. And that's different than if you're in the middle of nowhere, so to speak, or you're in a more isolated area and you don't have those kinds of exposures close to home. I just got back from visiting several customers in Seattle and California, and just again seeing that up close and being so close to it is a real big advantage here that folks should also really take advantage of.
Yeah, those are two great pieces of advice. And I think you and I share a real optimism about British Columbia and what it can be, and a real pride of what our unique points of advantage are. But I like to say I am nonetheless unapologetically ambitious about what more we could achieve.
Yeah, agreed.
Everything isn't perfect. So we do see that not quite as many companies do scale up as
Yeah.
quickly or as fully as we think they could. And when we think about that scale up challenge, that scale up problem, what's your opinion on some of the things that might make it harder for us that we could maybe try and tackle?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it is. I mean, there's just the economic reality that the Canadian dollar is relatively cheap to the U.S. dollar or international currency, and so acquiring business here and selling earlier is a an easier thing to do. And it does take a certain unapologetic ambition to continue to grow and do what's necessary to take those next steps and continue to invest and make it happen. And you can raise money, you don't have to, you can expand, but I think that what limits us at times is just thinking bigger and flipping the script, right? Like BC companies should be going out and doing more acquisitions. BC companies should be thinking about, how we can continue to take advantage and grow. Um, BC companies have a really unique advantage in many ways around software provision and our ability to deliver great products. And you have to think that way to be able to achieve that. And we are limited necessarily in some of the local examples to follow suit, right? And so it goes back to that anchor piece. I think now we're so much more fortunate that we were 10 years ago, 15 years ago, to have these great examples of organizations that are doing it and getting to that, really anchor size. And we shouldn't set our sights short. We should really be in it for the long term, and you should really continue to grow and be building a proud Canadian company and a proud BC company that can have an impact on the world, as opposed to just a local mindset. And that's a tough thing to do, but I think something that more and more people are getting exposed to and more people are thinking about.
I think you're right. I think it's so incredibly important to have anchors and to have people who can have experience, that on the ground, detailed, live it, breathe it, sniff it experience of what it is really like to scale up. And once you have that, it's kind of addictive, and you find yourself wanting to do it again and again and bigger. But so that if we could just activate that flywheel of ambition and success and growth, I think there's really no limit to what we can.
Yeah, I mean, we still say around here, it's early innings still here. It's early innings still. We're just scratching the surface of what we think we can do. We're really proud of where we've gotten, but there's still a lot more to come.
Absolutely. Watch this space. Okay, so listen, before we close out, I just want to make sure that I've given you an opportunity to answer a question I always ask, because
Mm.
we've got a lot of startups on the line. They're ambitious, but they're early stage. You know what that time can be like, the challenges you face. You have big ambitions, but day to day, it's a struggle.
Yeah.
What words of advice or encouragement would you offer to those who are at that early stage of the struggle?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that comes to mind for me is I know early on it's if you're a non-technical founder or if you're a non-technical individual, it's really easy to shy away from some of the technical pieces. If you're a technical founder, it's really easy to shy away from the sales motions or go to market or how do we get in front of customers. And I would just encourage folks to just jump in. Business is hard regardless. And I've seen people with very little technical expertise make great technical decisions, and I've seen people that are the most shy introverts in the world have the most amazing customer experience and cross the line. And I think we leverage those facets here actually every day. And so I think the thing is it's easy to get demotivated or feel like you're missing something or feel like you can't do it because you don't have X, Y, or Z in the business or at your side. And I think you have great resources to lean on in BC Tech for sure, but your peers here in the community, but also just as an individual, lean into those things and take the time to understand them and just make good decisions for your company at the time. And those will compound and really create success. And that can be a daunting aspect for a lot of individuals trying to grow their business when it's so busy day to day. And I think the other thing is, this is more a very practical one, is um, people will make your company and people will help your company grow, and you need the team absolutely. In order to manage that team well, and in order to make sure you're handling the growth of your business really well, hire a good HR person early, I think is really an understated fact that not a lot of people think about. But that will just help your business grow a lot more effectively and help you manage a lot of the changing jurisdictions and regulations that happen just with how to run your own business from that perspective. And I think that's a really a good one when you get the right PNC and the right HR people in the organization early on. That's really important.
So such good advice, really. And one final plug for me. If you are interested in learning more from your peers, please do get involved in the BC Tech Sea Council program. These are short peer-to-peer forums. They meet online and in person over lunch, and it's just a great opportunity to share with your peers what your experience is and learn from others. Now, we do have a couple of questions in the chat, so let me not neglect those. So one question around what are the top risks that you might need to pay attention to? What's the most challenging point so far? And what was the tipping point in terms of moving to becoming an anchor? And I'll let you answer whichever of those questions you find is most compelling, Zach, and then we'll close.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think one of the biggest risks right now is still, I think, Jill, you sort of had it as a poll question at the beginning, right? It's what the economic climate is doing. A very a very smart person around here once said, "Eat when fed," and we, whether you decide to fundraise or not is your choice, and there's the right choice for every business. We were very fortunate to eat when fed when the things were really good, and we raised a significant amount of money that's helped us still invest in our technology and invest in our people and invest in our product, even when times in the last 18 months have been leaner, right? There's been a lot of uncertainty, and that just is always the risk, right? Is how are you managing your budget and how are you managing your investment against product market fit, against customer revenue growth, and against things that you can't control. No startup and no technology company can control single-handedly what happens out there, and you have to be ready for when things go sideways. So you want to take advantage of the good times, but you still need to have a little bit of that sentiment in your head around what will happen if this doesn't work, and that can be everything from a product launch to a fundraising falling apart, to an economic down cycle, to a variety of other things. I think some of our Canadian conservativeness helped us a lot over the years in that respect at Trulioo. But that is the continual risk for your business. Like that, there's just no other way. And I think you've seen a lot of examples these days of companies that raised a lot of money, hired a lot of people, didn't necessarily have the revenue growth they were expecting, and were forced to really cut down. And that's detrimental for years to a business. And it really throws off your product development, your customer trust, and a lot of the different things you have to do. It can sometimes even force you to sell before you're ready to. So I think that's a big risk that you always, as a CEO or as an executive or just as a decision maker in your company, really need to be on top of. And I think alongside that, the other risk is just making sure about customers meet you halfway. And I think you need to build for your customers, and you need to really focus on product market fit. There's a ton of literature, there's a ton of great people that talk about that. But customers have to meet you halfway, and if they don't, that's a big risk to your business. So if you don't get good buying signals, if they don't meet you halfway on contract, and if they don't, support you with spend and feedback, that can be a big risk to your business. And I think you need to take those things seriously and make sure you find the right customers. There can be good customers that are not the right customers. You want to find the right customers and really be on that path. And so I think those are some of the big risks that I think about when you're trying to grow your startup. The other one that was asked, I think, was what was the inflection point, I guess, in terms of being an anchor. I don't actually think there's one major inflection point, to be honest. I'm a big proponent of, I call it sort of the 2% rule. If you're constantly just improving things, 2% here, 2% there, how can I get 2% better here? How can I improve our customer experience just a little bit here? How can I improve this process a little bit here? How can I unblock this piece a little bit here? How can I improve this feature a little bit here? It's a compounding effect on your business. And you wake up one day and you find that you're winning more deals than you're losing. Your customers are buying more than they were before. Your interactions are easier than they used to be. You have a lot more confidence building new product than you used to. You're getting things right more than you're getting them wrong. That just sort of snowballs over time if you're making good micro decisions along the way. And so I think there's been a lot of really small inflection points. I like the details. I like the good stuff that happen at sort of the layer there. And I think over time that's just, created a really solid business that's filling a really important need in the world. And that's just built really great relationships with customers and given a lot of great people an opportunity to shine and do something special that have worked here and that work here today. So that's sort of how I think about that.
Zach, thank you so much. Fantastic answers there. And thank you for being generous with your time and being honest and telling us the real story. We really appreciate it. And I know the audience will too. Thank you again.